In today's tutorial, we'll make the men's interchangeable scarf in the steep diagonal by Yarnspirations.com. Welcome back to another Yarnspirations tutorial. I'm your host, Kristen Mangus of GoodKnitKisses. Let's get started. For today's tutorial, you'll need a super bulky number 6 yarn. We're using Bernat Softee Chunky in color Emerald.
Welcome back to GoodKnitKisses. I'm your host Kristen, and today we are working on the steep diagonal scarf, and this is converting it to the loom. You can find the link down below to get your pattern, and I'm going to show you how to convert it from needles. I'm not changing the pattern up for you today because I want you to know how to read the pattern, how to convert it from needles onto the loom. This is a more dramatic version of the scarf. Instead of using the Caron Simply Soft, I'm using the Bernat Softee Chunky for a more bulky yarn to beef up these really cool diagonal angles here. And today we are working on a large gauge loom. This loom is 11/16 center peg to center peg dimension. You can use 12 stitches on any peg that's large gauge. You can also use this 48 peg nifty knitter if you have one. You can also get some other versions out there as alternates. So you want 5/8 or 11/16. I'm using 11/16. And my gauge is just slightly wider. You always want to look at the part that's out a little further too, and when it's off and really measure. So it's just slightly wider than the version I made on needles. So it's a really great conversion to use this one. Okay, so the yarn is a super bulky number 6, and it recommends a US 11 needle or 8mm, and you want to use these looms I recommended for that needle size. Okay, so we're going to get started. I'm going to turn it over here, and I'm going to show you how to cast on. Now you can do the long tail cast on and find the video on my channel, on my YouTube channel. So if you go down the links below, I'll put that in there later on. But I want to show you how to do the cable cast on the loom because I really like it and I want to show it off to you today. So we're going to start by making a slip knot any way that you like to do it. Okay, so I'm just working on the other side of this loom right now just to show you, and then I'm going to move over to the other side and continue the pattern on. Okay, so this loom's really great because it's got 12 stitches all on the front. It makes it a really portable project for you to take along. Okay, so we put our slip knot on here, and we're going to wrap our yarn around the front of this peg here. Okay, and take our loom tool, and I'm going to go up through this loop here, and I'm going to pull down on the yarn here until I make a new loop. I'm just going to flip it and put it on the next peg. I'm going to take my yarn, kind of pull back at the back like that, tighten it up, get this little tail in here, and now we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to go around the front of that peg. We're making a knit stitch, so we're lifting up the lower loop, pulling down that top one and making a loop. We flip it, place it, tighten. I'm going to keep going all the way down until we have 12 stitches cast on. Okay. Always want to pull that yarn to the back. Get it nice and tight. And I'll show you what it looks like when it comes out because I have the sample on the other side here. If you've enjoyed using the True Knit cast on, the True Cable cast on, let me know and write in the comments below and tell me your thoughts on it. I find it to be a nice, stable cast on. I don't have to tighten it up. It looks really beautiful and no problems with it. It's rugged enough to handle a scarf that gets a lot of wear. Okay, getting there. Okay, whoops. Flip that. Tighten that. Okay, so I've got 12 all the way down. Now my working yarn is all the way down here, and I'm just gonna, for good measure, I like to get myself another stitch here going. So I just put the stitch on top and complete what's called a half stitch. It's just basically, instead of an E-wrap, I'm just kind of going around this way. It's sort of like a unit stitch here, so it's really what that is. So we're just going around like that one time and knitting that, and that way my working yarn is behind this peg now. And so this is now cast on and it's ready to go. I'm gonna go ahead and flip over though and show you what this looks like. This is this cast on here. It has this nice edge to it. I haven't done any tightening or anything like that. Okay, so it's nice and flexible and stretchy, but it's not super loopy or anything like that. Okay, so I'm going to get started on making the stitch here. Just one moment, and I'm going to pull this off not to confuse you with all these extra strands. So I've ended over on this right hand side over here, and this is where I was on my cast on. So this is a few rows in, I'm sorry, not just a few rows in, this is a few stitch pattern rows in. It is a 12 row repeat, and I'm going to show you the pattern here in a second, but I want you to see this nice diagonal that it's creating. So let me flip over to the pattern so that we can show you what's going on. So this is the pattern here. The instructions are a multiple of 6. So if you want a wider scarf, you could use, say, 18, just whatever is the multiple of 6. So all the row 1s are the right side, and all of the row 2s, all the even rows, are the wrong side on needles. What you do is you do the opposite stitch on the wrong side rows. So a P is a K, so you're going to knit instead of purl. The way it works on this pattern is, so if I have 12 stitches across, I'm going to purl 3, knit 3, purl 3, knit 3. So the last 3 stitches are knit. So you actually end up reversing, going backwards. So you can actually use this part backwards. You can go, okay, knit 3, purl 3, knit 3, purl 3. So it on the front side, it will look the same as this pattern. So basically it's stacking the look. So whatever you look at the front of your work, these are actually double rows on each other. Okay, so that'll make sense in just a moment. But basically it's repeated across. Okay, but you're going to want to pay attention to these first few stitches on each row because they'll change, but your total is the same. So this 1 plus 3 plus 2 is always 6, right? So we'll knit 1 and purl 3, and then the next 2 here get added to this 1 because it gets repeated across. So everything is in series of 6, okay? So it'll be 3s or 6s. All right, let me move over, and now that I've thoroughly confused you, let's go. Let's move forward with the pattern. So row 1, we're going to purl across. The purl stitch is going to go in front of the stitch and down below it. So we're going to scoop up from the bottom like we're pulling a pearl from the ocean. We're going to pull out that loop here and take it off and put it back on the peg here, and go to the next one and scoop up, make that purl stitch, pull it off, and put the new one on. So we're lifting that up, doing the purl, taking the old loop off, putting the new loop on, and I don't tighten it too tight. Now, when I'm going to do the knit stitch on here, I'm actually going to do a U-knit stitch so that it's a truer knit stitch rather than an E-wrap. An E-wrap is going to make it too loose and it's not going to lay right. So we're just going to lay that on top, lift the bottom loop over the top, and we have that stitch done. So lifting the bottom loop over the top of a loosely wrapped yarn is going to be our knit stitch. That's also called a U-knit stitch in the loom. So for the people who regularly loom, you know all that, but I'm doing that for the benefit of the other people who are new. So we're going to purl 3 and knit 3 all the way across. Okay, and then we're going to purl 3 here. I'm sorry, we just purled 3. We're going to knit 3. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so we pay attention to the row that we just did. When we're working from right to left, we are working the pattern as it's stated. When we're going from left to right, just repeat what you just did, but backwards. So we're going to go back over it again and knit 2, knit 3. And a little trick, if you're a tight knitter, you can go back and kind of pull on your stitches here to even these out. If you tend to pull it too tight, you can do that way. Okay, I'm going to purl the next 3. So all odd rows are working from right to left, and even rows are working from left to right. Okay, since this is a flat panel and we're working back and forth, it doesn't matter if you start in one direction or the other, but to be close as needles as possible, that's why I'm starting on this side and working this way from left to right first, because that's how I would normally work on the needles. And of course, this is a reversible scarf, so it has a reverse effect when you flip it over. So there's sort of not a right or wrong side once you're done, because it's just a mirror image, but for practical purposes of talking about a pattern, you want to talk about the right and wrong side when you're actually knitting. Okay, so we've completed 2 rows. That was row 2 that we did. Now we're going to look back at the pattern, and the pattern says knit 1, purl 3, knit 2 across. And then we repeat that over our stitch pattern. So we're going to knit 1. So I just did this one. Yes, we're wrapping it again. Now I'm working on this. Okay, now purl 3. I'm working on this going by exactly what their pattern calls for. Now, if you notice that on yours you see the edge stitches aren't as pristine and lined up, that's just the nature of going back and forth from actually working these last stitches. You also can do a slip stitch. You can do an edging treatment. You could do a garter stitch on the edge and have a few extra stitches, like 2 or 3 extra stitches on the sides to frame it out and make a nice border. If you did that, I would start with a few rows of garter just to get you going. Okay, that's knit 1, purl 3. So we did knit 1, knit 1, purl 3, 1, 2, 3. And now we're going to knit that 1, 2, 3. If this has already helped you, I'd love for you to just go ahead and comment and let me know. And if you have other questions on converting, you can always ask me. I don't convert other people's patterns. If it's a stitch pattern I can help with, I'd be happy to do so. Okay. All right. The first stitch was a knit. Okay, so there was 1. We need to complete that number of 3. So we're going to finish out with the 2 here at the end. So that's what I meant by you're going to be going in 3s and 6s. Okay, because you need 3 knits and 3 purls to complete one of the stitch patterns, but they alternate to get that diagonal. So I just knit these last 2. Now I'm going to knit them again and work in the reverse. So simply all your even rows going back from left to right are all going to be done this way. They're just going to repeat what you just did in reverse order. So when you're knitting on needles, if you went in a circular fashion, you would have to do it this way. And but if you were working, but since you're working on a loom, it actually makes it a little easier. If you ever have a stitch pattern, if you ever have a chart in knitting, you're going to do what the chart reads. So the stitches that show on the front and all the rows is what you're going to work. you don't have to worry about the wrong side rows. But if you start reading the directions will say what to do on the wrong side rows. So you can get yourself confused if you're going back and forth and not remembering that the written instructions are going to talk about the wrong side. However, if it's a circular pattern on needles, then everything is the right side. The only thing you need to make sure is that you know the terminology that's used for needles or for the loom, because the terminology could be slightly different than what you're used to. Most things are the same, but sometimes terms can be confusing, and Google is your friend. And those things, and then and ask me as well. So we're on to the next row. We've already done 4, and we're going to go to the next one. It's knit 2. Now if you notice the pattern, I started with 3 purls and then I jumped to the knit. So because once you finish 3 of the purl, you're going to do the opposite stitch and you're going to knit 1. Then the next set goes to knit 2, and if you see the pattern, it goes to knit 3. So when we're going from right to left, you're going to remember the beginning of that. So after you do the knit 3, yep, guess what? You go to a purl and you go 1 and then 2, and that completes the whole thing. So if you want to jump ahead, you can totally do that, but now I'm going to go to the knit 2. Knit 1 and 2, purl 3, okay, so knit 1, 2, purl 1, 2, 3, knit 1, 2, 3, purl 1, 2, 3, and because we knit 2 at the beginning, we're just going to knit the 1 at the end. So you knit that 1, and don't forget you've got to finish out and do it again, because now you're going to work your way back, because we're not slipping that first stitch. If you're new to slipping stitches at the beginning of a panel is basically ignoring it. You're not actually working that first stitch if you did it. Some people call it skip, but that's technically not what it is. So if you want a tip on here, you don't want to mark your loom, because if you mark your loom, you're going to forget that this pattern moves. Okay, so you could try a movable stitch marker, and you could even do one of those pencil grips and cut it to a small size and kind of slice the end of it, and so it just pops on and off. And because there's 12 rows, you could use the first 12 pegs of your loom. And on row 1, you can have it here. On row 2, you can move it here. Row 3, 4, 5, and you can move it on down to remember what row you're on, so you can make your own little row counter. What do you think about that? Tell me in the comments if you think that would help you. And then you know where you left off. I would suggest, though, if you have that on and then you go and leave your project sitting around, you might want to put a shower cap on the top of it or a rubber band or something. Make sure that stitch marker doesn't just pop off if you're just solely relying on that to tell you what your row is. Okay, we're going to finish that out. Knit the last 2 stitches. All right. And see, look, we did the 2, so now we're jumping on to the 3. Knit 3, purl 3. One, 2, 3. I think I got a little tight on that stitch. So let me even that out. So again, the pattern is going to be found on the Yarnspirations blog, and there is a link. There is a video currently on the Yarnspirations YouTube channel, and I'll eventually have it on my channel, and the link will be there, and we might be able to see if we can get that converted on over Through Yarnspirations, we'll have to see about that. But in the meantime, you've got it all here listed out for you. So work all your even rows just as you did working in the opposite direction. So you'll see what I mean here in a second. So we've purled on the last 3 is what we're going to do. So we're knitting 3 and purling 3 in our 6s, multiples of 6s. So remember that even row just does exactly what you just did, except backward. So you're just repeating the stitch. And if you're not familiar with looking at your stitches, look over to the back here, and this is what a purl stitch looks like. Okay, so it's like a scarf. It wears a scarf and it's hugging around the back of this neck here. And then a knit stitch is much tighter, and you can flip that right on over and you can see how that stitch is right here. And if I try and pull a stitch from here, there's not one. See how it's kind of naked? So you know that this is a purl. So this purl, it's from the back side, it's like this, because really you're looking at the V of the knit stitch here. And this one you're looking at the purl bump on the back of this knit stitch. So that's how you can tell on the loom. All right, so let's purl these stitches here. I'll see if I can write this out in the comments, but I want to make sure and let you know where to get the main pattern. Also to get the Bernat Softee Chunky yarn. This is brought to you by Yarnspirations. And so the yarn you can get on the yarnspirations.com site. You can also get it at Joann stores and other stores that carry it. I'm using the solid today. I think it shows the stitches well. When you have stitches that move around like this, the solid shows it nicely. And if you share this video on your social media, of course, it'll come up in your little memories, right? But be sure and save it, and you can save and make your own playlists as well, at least on YouTube. Move on to the next one. So if you've guessed it, you're going from working on the knit 3, purl 3, then we repeated that, and what comes after the knit? A purl. So we're going to purl 1 and then knit 3. Go underneath that stitch there, make that purl stitch. Knitting 3, purling 3. It's like a dance. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay. And with so few stitches for the scarf, I mean, it's really easy to go, oh, did I do 1 here or what? You know, so I did 1 knit, 3 purl, 3 knit, and oh yeah, sorry, 1 purl, 3 knit, 3 purl, and then knit, see? Knit, knit, knit. And then purl. Again, this loom is 11/16, or you can use a 5/8. That's a large gauge loom. You can also use this super bulky yarn on a extra large, which is a 3/4. It'll just have a different size. So to get this the same size as the needle, then that's why we're using this one. So now we're coming back. So we want to purl 2 because we just purled 2 at the end here. And knit. 1, 2, 3, whoop. This diagonal pattern here shows up really well in this super bulky, but it looks also very nice in the Caron Simply Soft. It's got smaller stitches, a smaller gauge, and so it has like a finer hand, so you would want to use a smaller loom, less spacing for a yarn weight that's lighter weight. Now you can always use multiple strands on this one. I recommend using the appropriate tool for the yarn that you desire to use. So the appropriate tool would be to change your loom when you change the yarn. And then you get what's best for the yarn, and the hand will feel really nice. Okay, so now I've done that. And we're now on row 11, and we're going to purl 2 because we started with purl 1 last time, and this will be the last time we work in this direction for the stitch pattern. Purl 2, and knit, 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 and purl, 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 and knit, 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 and last one, purl. All right, so we have finished row 11. You have one more row in that stitch pattern repeat. And here I'm going to make a little warning here. If you decide to start your stitch pattern here again and forget this fact, you will in fact change the direction of your scarf. However, you can do that intentionally and make a zigzag. So that will work too. We're going to go back and we're going to purl. And we're going to knit. But if you make that zigzag, of course, you're not making the diagonal, the steep diagonal pattern, you're making something else. However, that's a little hack or an explanation if you see that your work is zigzagging. And you're like, what is happening to my scarf? It's a design choice. Okay, so the last 3 knit stitches here, and then we'll purl 2. Purl 2, 1, and 2. Okay, so now this is purling 2. We've got the it was about right here. So this is where your 12 row repeat is. I've got 1, 2, 3 12 row repeats here, and then you're going to make your scarf as long as you desire here. So this is the right side of this one with the same cast on. This is the wrong side. See how it goes in the other direction. So when you wear your scarf crossed over itself, it will have this nice mirrored effect. Okay, and then you can also make it short and, you know, stitch these together and have a nice or make it long, whatever, and make a infinity scarf. That would be fun too. And then you want to bind off in pattern. You can do a basic bind off or bind off in pattern, and what you do is you just work those first couple of stitches and then knit them over the top. You can see my channel and the links below. I'll include a basic bind off. You can also bind off in pattern. So when you see a pattern that says bind off in pattern, if this was a knit stitch before, make the knit stitch. If this was a purl stitch before, make the purl stitch. And then when you move that stitch on over and lift the bottom over the top, you have bound that stitch off in the stitch from the previous. You bound off in pattern, and then you just keep moving this along. So you'll see that in another video. I hope that has helped you today. And if you want to check out more videos on GoodKnitKisses YouTube page, I would love it. Be sure and let me know. And thank you for joining me today. Have a great day and happy looming. Bye-bye.